Hello, and a very warm welcome to this, the latest in our series of Sport for Business leadership interviews. I'm delighted to be joined all the way from deepest County Louth by Liam Harbison, who is head of the Sport Ireland Institute of Sport. Welcome, Liam.
Hi, Rob. Nice to see you.
And tell me something now. You've come from a world of high performance sport, which is all about physical activity, and it's all about the interaction of getting that additional 1% and 2% out of individuals so that they can perform at their best.
Yeah.
Now everything has been taken away and we're all operating in little boxes on Zoom screens. Tell me, how have you found that personally, being removed from the institute and put into your home office there?
Yeah, okay. I'm fine. I've worked from home before, but obviously never for such a long period, and generally when the house is empty. And I think with my wife working full time as a secondary teacher and 3 kids, 14, 9 and 2 in the house, it's been I suppose interesting to say the least. The first few weeks were tough. We tried to keep the routine with the children around sort of school day, but we realized it was causing too much stress in the house, so we abandoned that after the first week or two. And really, once we got into some sort of a routine where they did 2 or 3 hours a day, we were happy enough, and that basically took a lot of the edge off it. And to be honest with you, we're in a routine now. It works now. It's changed a bit today, obviously, since the latest announcement on Friday. It's clear schools aren't going back, secondary or primary, so there's been a bit of militancy amongst my 2 boys this morning around doing any schoolwork, but they're doing a little bit. But we'll carry on. I suppose when I think about this whole experience and this lockdown, like I like to think there's been, while it's on the basis of a global medical crisis, and obviously like there's over 1,300 deaths in Ireland, which is it's harrowing. The whole experience, though, there is some positives to it, and I think people, I find, they're missing the important things in life. They're the social contacts, the hugs, the social gatherings. But essentially, it's not the material things. It's not about the house, the clothes, the car, the holidays. And I think that's quite a positive, and it sort of gives us a new foundation. And for me personally, like the lockdown I see has given me back sort of 13 to 14 hours a week that I'd be commuting to and from the Sport Ireland campus. And that certainly gives food for thought and makes you think. And I'm certainly glad I've had this time at home. I've had more time with the children. Work is challenging, for sure. We're all looking at Zoom screens or Microsoft Teams, etc. Having said that, I am ready to get back for sure. I'd like a couple of days back in the office just to get that grounding again and keep us moving. But certainly, in the rounds, like the crisis has been okay. It's had its challenging moments, but I think as a sporting community and the stakeholders in high performance sport, we've all worked very well together, collaborated very strongly. And I do think we've become stronger as a result. And I think we're all just ready to go once we get the go ahead from government.
Okay, that has been clear, that you've maintained that relationship with, fellow practitioners in the high performance side of it. So, the HB directors in the different sports, you've been keeping in touch on calls, Zoom calls, whatever, as you said there. The world of the athlete and the high performance athlete can sometimes be quite self-isolating regardless, that it's quite a focused world, that you know exactly where you're going to be at such and such a time and what you have to do, what you have to achieve. Do you think from an athlete's perspective that this sort of massive disruption to schedule and plan and forward progress, do you think has that been harder for them than it might have been for those of us who have got the family unit and the work colleagues and our own units that we can actually fall back on?
Yeah, well, I think you talk to many athletes, they all talk about their own team, their support unit, whether it be their coach, their support providers, family, friends. They all have their own units, whatever that makeup is. And I think initially, athletes, I think, were very strong, very positive, certainly recognized the enormity of the situation. And in the main, I think we're quite sort of stoic about it and just sort of got on with it. I think as it's pushed on, I think the challenge is the lack of certainty. Athletes like to work to plans, to goals, And I suppose the goal now potentially is still 15 months away from maybe just being 3 or 4 months. They don't have any certainty around what's going to happen with their international calendar this year, if there will be any. I think that does present some challenges for athletes. However, I've been really, really pleased over the last sort of 6-7 weeks with the team we have at the Sport Ireland Institute that they have maintained their support to athletes and sports throughout that period, albeit has to be remotely. But certainly, if an athlete had a regular contact, for example, with our sports site, that has been maintained. And they've developed further contacts and further supports as the crisis has emerged. So I've been really, really pleased by the engagement of our team with the athletes. We've certainly reached out to all athletes who are sort of on our books, really try and make sure that none fall through the cracks. And some are having some challenges, but in the main, they are being supported, whether it be with our psych team, our life skills team, medical, nutrition, etc. And I think athletes, by their very nature, they deal with adversity all the time. They're quite robust, quite resilient. I think this crisis has just shown that is the case pretty much across the board.
Yeah, that point has been made, that in sport we understand about the fact that not every day can be a winning day, that you do have to bounce back from the things that go wrong that you could never have imagined or never have planned. This is obviously that on a massive, unheard of before scale. Do you think the way that these changes have manifested itself in terms of the additional time, perhaps the less time stuck with stationary muscles in a car traveling to, X, Y, and Z training centers, do you think that the adoption of technology that we've actually all taken to will actually have a place once things go back to what might be the new normal?
That's an interesting question. Well, I think you hear this phrase, the new normal. New normal, whenever that is, in a few weeks or a few months, will obviously be different to what we experienced 6 months ago. And I definitely think remote technology will certainly play a large part of that. But again, trying to look for the positives in that. So like the work that our team do, half the work doesn't take place in the Sport Ireland Institute High Performance Centre at the Sport Ireland campus. It takes place at training sites and competition venues throughout the country and internationally. I think what this has actually done, it's shown us that we can operate a really professional service with experts in their chosen field, irrespective of where they are geographically. So I think it actually opens up a world. So let's say, for example, we had an athlete from Limerick, and we had assigned them, let's say, a nutritionist, for example. And let's say over time that relationship has worked its way through, and there needs to be new impetus. So who's to say that I can't put Sharon Madigan, who's based in Belfast, who's our head of nutrition, to be the provider for that athlete, despite the fact they may never actually get to sit in the same room because of social distancing or whatever. So I think there is opportunities there, and we've operated this way for quite a while. So, for example, we have a couple of clinical psychologists on our team. Paul Gaffney is well renowned. He's based in Cavan, can't access athletes all over the country, so he does his operation remotely. So I just think it certainly provides another tool in our armory to actually provide effective support to athletes. And I think one of the real striking points for us is we recognized straight away the importance of connectedness and social contact amongst the stakeholders. And we conducted sort of weekly and fortnightly calls with the CEO group, the PD group, obviously with my colleague Paul McDermott in the high performance unit, and with the OFI and with Paralympics Ireland. And these proved really useful, but ultimately we recognized that people in leadership roles as well, they often have very isolating roles. And it's been really positive to see the engagement with them. So with the PD group in particular, running the Sparking Performance Program has proved really challenging to get all the PDs into the same room together for a day or two, maybe every 6 months, because of the nature of international competition. They're not in the country. And we've always struggled to pull them together as a group. And if we have a session, we might have 8 or 9 or 10. But what's actually happened through this crisis, through remote technologies, we've had pretty much 15 to 20 on the call every single week. So that's a lesson for us that actually that's probably the way we should be communicating with the PD group, because it works for them no matter where they are in the world. And many of our PDs are not in Ireland at the moment, but they're still tying into that group and collaborating and working as a group. So it's been quite interesting. I'm pretty sure we will continue with Zoom and continue with Microsoft Teams, quite significantly over months and years. And I say even in the short term, while we try and reopen the institute building over the coming months in accordance with government guidelines, we won't be in a position really to have face-to-face meetings. We'll continue the remote meetings. And I think these will become stable for us, I would say, for the next year, possibly.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot to be said in that, though. If you think of getting the big meeting all together once every 6 months versus the 26 sort of fortnightly sessions that you might be able to have, because it's always the way that if there's one big meeting, everybody has to be on their A game to actually get the best out of that. Whereas the concept of little and often, as opposed to the one big hit every 6 months, has probably got an awful lot going for it. But
that's not to say we've all been, Rob, at conferences whereby we go to the conference, we look at the content, we look at who's speaking, we go, yeah, I like to look at this, but actually the real value is in the coffee breaks, is over the evening meal, or potentially in the bar in the evening time. That's where the real work. And we focus very much in the Institute. We believe very strongly in the relationship. The deeper and the more embedded the relationships are between our team of providers and the athletes, with their coaches and their PDs, the better it is for everyone in terms of identifying where some of the challenges are, but also creating solutions for those challenges. So I think that is something we have lost in the short term and potentially for a period of time. And it's not to underestimate. We do crave to bring that back. And what we had set out to do in the Sport Ireland Institute, particularly over the last sort of 2 to 3 years, is really to make it a hub for the high performance community. It's the only building on the Sport Ireland campus that's solely for high performance athletes. We want it to become a home for them. And through a number of initiatives, we've tried to make it open up to not just athletes, but their coaches, their PDs, the CEOs. So we brought in the athlete breakfast, for example. And the idea behind that is that we could get athletes, just meeting athletes from other sports, cross-sharing of experiences, ideas, same with coaches, PDs. So again, building those relationships, building those ideas to basically develop and improve on their own practices to make them better competitors. And ultimately, we've lost that, and we would have seen the benefit of that really through Team Ireland, whether it be at the European Games last year or at the Olympic Games next year. So we really, really do crave to come back to creating that hub environment again. So I'd be fearful that we may have lost something in the short term, but I would hope that the work we've done and the way the whole community, the high performance community, bought into those programs, whether it be the CEO check-ins, whether it be Sparking Performance, whether it be PEP or the athlete breakfast, I would hope that we'll be able to scale them up very, very quickly when we get the go-ahead and actually regenerate that hub idea. It's really, really important for us.
Okay, I think it is. Yeah, you make the point that we're in maintenance phase at the moment, and we've hosted a whole series of webinars which have been very good, very educational. But there's something final about when you click the end meeting for all button, which in the course of having everybody physically together in the room, that's really the beginning of where the magic happens. Whereas now it is very much sort of click and you're gone. You mentioned about the fact that we've got a roadmap now and a reopening of Ireland in so many ways, of which sport is only one, but it is an important one. I guess you, together with many others, have been poring over those dates and parsing the meaning of how social distancing can apply across the various different sports. I don't want to put you on the spot as to say that you will be back on X, Y, and Z of a day, but does that help you now, knowing the fact that the rest of the world knows a roadmap, that it knows where in broad terms, where we can get to, that gives you a skeleton now on which you can build the more granular detail of how you're going to reopen?
Yeah, I suppose if I go back to my previous comments about leadership and how it can be very isolating, I've been very impressed by how leaders in this country, whether it be political, medical, HSE executive, and business leaders, have really managed the crisis. No doubt in the fullness of time, all actions will be reviewed globally. I think we'll find our leaders manage the crisis as best they could in real time. And not meaning to be political in any way, I've been very reassured throughout a medical emergency that our Taoiseach is a medical doctor. And I think when you see what's happened in other countries, it's quite reassuring. And I think for me, that's given me great solace and great comfort that these people, they're working night and day, they're struggling, and they're making decisions that have an impact on 5 million people. And in some cases, they're making some of those decisions somewhat in the dark. So I think they really have put their best foot forward and really have acted on behalf of all of us in the best possible way. So I think it's important to say that. But I've also been impressed by sporting leaders also, and they've collaborated strongly. Like they've supported Sport Ireland initiatives to prepare the sector for some form of return. I'm confident they'll continue to do so, despite the obvious financial and social pressures for them. But in terms of the plan, like whether one likes the plan in full, elements of it, or not at all, I welcome the fact we have a roadmap. And while a certain amount of the plan from a sports perspective, I think is open to interpretation and subject to further clarity, at least it presents the way forward. I'd be hopeful that sort of with the strong measures in place, we will be able to phase the reopening of the Sport Ireland Institute High Performance Centre in phase 2 from June the 8th. Our offering to sports, though, will be very limited at that stage, but I'm confident we can start at that date on the basis of the measures we put in place during our phased shutdown. So we would have had a series of measures that we implemented probably on a weekly basis right up until we closed on the 24th of March. And that sort of has given us a blueprint for a reopening. Now, we will put in additional measures for some supports, so for example, such as physio, medicine. We'll have to start seeking PPE and obviously much more stringent cleaning procedures, for example, in the gym where equipment is shared. I suppose one of the big challenges when I look at the plan for us is really the requirement that like non-essential journeys outside your region, which is 20 kilometers, they don't really start until phase 4, which is July the 20th. So that will potentially preclude many athletes, coaches from accessing our centre until the end of July, unless some other possible dispensation is given to HP athletes, which I would hope possibly it could. But I was
going to say that, like, is there, we have heard talk from, other leaders around the world of special dispensation to bring sports people across international boundaries, never mind, from Cork or Kerry or Galway or Donegal to the Institute. But there is that potential, I guess, that if you are, a carded athlete, if you're on an Olympic pathway, that there may be some dispensation sought for that.
It's striking the balance, Rob, whereby obviously we've got the public health guidance and making sure, like any decision we make, the absolute main tenet behind that is that the athlete's health and well-being, and obviously the staff and the people who are working with them is first and foremost. The second thing is that the training environment is safe. Now, but they're also, where we work in a high performance world, and as lockdown is eased sort of gradually across the world, we do want to make sure that we have a fair shot of competing against the world when we get to Tokyo next year. So for every month or 2 or 3 months that our athletes aren't able to train, we're potentially at a competitive disadvantage down the road in Tokyo. Having said that, that's not the primary concern, is people's health, obviously. But in the mind of an athlete or somebody working in high performance sport, these are critical decisions. Every week makes a difference. So I know certainly within the submission that Sport Ireland passed into government, with that they collaborated strongly with the NGBs, there certainly was a case for extending the 2K, which is now 5K from today, thankfully. Obviously, we do want to get high performance athletes back training quickly. And then obviously it's a whole range of measures then for other sports to open up. I'd be confident that when the lockdown came in first, we managed to keep the Sport Ireland campus open for HP athletes. And I think there is a blueprint there that we will work internally, and we'll work with the department, work with government to try and even get us back to that starting point where the HP swimming squad can access the National Aquatic Centre for their pool sessions, and can access the Institute for the gym sessions. The likes of Rhys McClenaghan and his teammates can access the National Gymnastics Centre in the National Indoor Arena, and then do their their strength sessions in the Institute. There is practice that we've put in place already that did work. Obviously, when the issue around non-essential workers came in, I think on the 24th of March, everything had to close down. But I would be hopeful that in time that we will get the high performance athletes back sooner rather than later. Obviously employing social distancing, and while there may be some challenges. So, for example, the plan talks phase 5 return for the likes of boxing. I think it was rugby, wrestling. I think was specifically mentioned in the document. That's around those athletes returning to contact, as in obviously boxers will be sparring. But I still think maybe they can't spar till August, but they should still be able to condition and still be able to do their gym sessions or their plyometrics works or some other work potentially in the institute before then. So there's a lot of interpretation, a lot of stuff to work through, and I'd be hopeful we'll get as many of the athletes back as soon as we possibly can. But obviously, it's still a little bit up in the air. I'd imagine the earliest date that we can start providing some support, and will be limited, that date will be probably the 8th of June, and that's still to be confirmed.
Okay, and in many ways, the world of high performance athletics is that you're concerned about all aspects of the athlete's physical well-being. So in terms of testing, in terms of the biometrics in the individual's body, you're probably as well equipped a place to deal with the areas of public health as anywhere else. There was a real sense.
I think one thing that we have to be clear on, that well, we can put all the protective measures we have in place in the high performance center at the Sport Ireland Institute or in the facilities on the campus. The issue is athletes have to travel there, and how they're getting there. Are they traveling in cars? Is there more than one person in the car? Do they have to come by public transport? So everywhere where the risk is heightened, it provides us a greater challenge to actually get us back up to full operation. And then also the piece around obviously accommodation, like our athletes living where they've family members who maybe are frontline workers in the health system. So these are all issues where we may have to put in some protocols, some safeguards, where we may have a sport back, but an athlete or two in that sport may not be able to come back at that time. And that's not me being alarmist. That's just saying we do have to look at this on a sport by sport basis, and then potentially at an athlete by athlete basis, depending on the risk level they bring in to the rest of the athlete community. So one thing we did do before close, that we put in for the first time sport specific training slots in the gym, where a sport had a specific hour, and that was to prevent any spread of the virus should the virus come into the institute from one sport to the other. We will actually look at this idea of clusters, and these are the measures we'll put in place from the very start. We had a temperature check and self-report health screen on entry. We will continue with all of them, but again, we will have to make some tough decisions over the coming weeks and months. And it's not to restrict or to impinge any athlete in their performance development. It's about the well-being of them, but also of their fellow athletes, their coaches, but also the staff we have working for us as well at the Sport Ireland Institute.
Okay, and there was talk previously in, shall we say, more rarefied financial atmospheres of Premier League and NFL in America of sequestering players in 5-star hotels and things like that. We're not at that stage that we're actually going to take Team Ireland for the Olympics and take them out of their natural environment and put them into a complete level of isolation.
No, I think certainly within the guidelines and the documents we've prepared with the sports, we have identified the idea of quarantine and what that looks like, but we've also been realistic and say it's probably not a viable option in Ireland, either financially, but even socially. And part of the reason behind that, particularly from the view of our service providers. So our service providers work across a range of sports. And if we were to go into a system of quarantine where we put, let's say, a physio and a nutritionist in quarantine with a sport, if that's the way the sport wants to go, we then basically we're preventing that physio and that nutritionist from actually supporting the athletes they've supported for the last 3 or 4 years in other sports. So it's not really feasible, I think, for some of the Olympic sports. Now, some of the professional sports may have a different view on it. It certainly is challenging, but even in a quarantine sake, you still have to access food supply and deliveries. There's still potential for that sort of quarantine to be breached by people from the outside, potentially who could be bringing in the virus. So it's very, very difficult to monitor. Yeah. But ultimately, the other challenge we have is that to be very careful around, obviously, international travel is a huge part of the high performance world. And I suppose we're in a bit of a holding pattern, and we're waiting for international federations to really try and determine their international calendar for the next sort of year, year and a half, and that then impacts on. We have to make decisions then as well and risk assess the availability of the providers contracted to the Sport Ireland Institute to travel with, whether that be rowing or a boxing or a canoeing or a badminton. So that's another phase of decision making and risk assessment we'll have to do. I'd say it's much later down the road, probably towards the end of the summer, but that will obviously have an impact on the level of support we can provide supports build up to the Olympic Games. But if we're entering a situation, say next year, where there is some limitations or restrictions put in place that guarantee that the games take place, and that requires a quarantine of Team Ireland, I'm sure Team Ireland won't be found wanting, and we'll certainly review our position at that stage. And I think my view would be, if the Olympic Games happen, and I'm pretty hopeful and pretty sure they will, obviously the Paralympic Games as well, we will take whatever steps are necessary to make sure the Irish athletes who want to compete and want to go to the Olympic Games and their sports, that we can support them effectively and with them.
Okay, I know you've been working closely with the Olympic Federation of Ireland and building a kind of a sense of momentum that we might never have had previously going into an Olympic Games. From the logistics, from the backup, from the support, as well as from the performance of the athletes. Obviously, we've got teams that are heading down there now. The women's hockey team, obviously in a new world from their perspective in terms of actually getting to an Olympic game. So it's a different beast than it's ever been before in terms of the Olympics. Now even more so. Do you think that sense of momentum, that sense of collaboration and working together, do you think will that carry through the uncertain times? Like, I would love to think that we would not have any bumps on the road between now and the end of July 2021 and guarantee that the Olympics would take place and then the Paralympics after that. But inevitably, there is going to be various degrees and senses of, oh, will this happen? International travel, the camps, all of those variables. How hard will it be to keep the momentum of Team Ireland and the individual athletes as part of that?
It's a very difficult question to answer, Rob, if I'm honest. But I suppose there is a new mood and momentum within Irish HB sports, I suppose, over the last 2 or 3 years, and that a lot of the organisations have sort of integrated much stronger and work much closer together in the cycle. Obviously, and we've our own MOU in terms of performance support delivery to Team Ireland, both to the Olympic team and to the Paralympic team with Sport Ireland Institute. And we don't really get a chance to see the fruits of that partnership this year as planned. However, I look at it very, very much in the basis that we have an extra year to put our plans in place, to road test and to prepare them. And I think ultimately there's so many things we just don't have control over. Like, we don't have control over the fact that the game's postponed. We don't have control currently over the qualification system for many sports. 1 or 2 are starting to emerge. We don't have control over when some of the measures around the pandemic and international travel will be lifted. What we will do is we'll certainly keep abreast of what's happening globally. We'll look at all the medical advice, whether it be from the World Health Organization, the public health authorities here, and we'll certainly put in the best plans we can at any given time to make sure we can support the athletes. And I suppose in my role, I also have the privilege of being the Deputy Chef de Mission for Team Ireland, along with Gavin Noble. And we have worked closely with the OFI and with Paralympics Ireland to reconfigure the plans that we can reconfigure for 2021. And I'd be hopeful that there'll be no, well, in the short term, there probably is a bit of a lessening in terms of momentum and the mood towards the game. I've no doubt that as we get through the summer and we start seeing the measures reduced, that the athlete population, the PDs, the coaches, they will start just pushing on as they always have been, very committed, very determined, and they're high performance people. And ultimately, high performance people want to be judged on the highest stage, which is the Olympic and Paralympic Games. And I've no doubt that we as a country will bounce back from a high performance level. And I don't think the delay of a year in any way diminishes the work we've put in heretofore or diminishes our potential to succeed. There's been so much success in Irish high performance sport both through the summers of 2018 and 2019, really at an unprecedented level. But interestingly, across a range of sports, not just one or two, across a range of sports. And I'd still be hopeful that we will, despite the obvious climatic challenges that Japan presents in terms of heat, humidity, I have no doubt that we will put in a stellar performance, and hopefully we'll have some very significant success. I suppose one of the examples I always give of the postponement, so in my role with the OFI, I look after sort of cycling with Brian Nugent and Matt McCarrow, and we had a partnership in place with Masuda City around their pre-games holding camp. So we're currently in a holding pattern. We've a meeting date set with the officials in that city at the end of May to basically review our partnership. They have absolutely committed to us for another year. Cycling Ireland have committed to them for another year. And while there is obvious hurt on the Japanese side around postponement of the games and all that entails, they have absolutely come back on board to give us the level of support that we had planned all the time. And I'm quite confident that whether it be Fukuroi Hamamatsu, whether it be Iwate, where hockey are due to travel to, Miyazaki for boxing, and Masuda for cycling, that the plans don't really change. If anything, we strengthen them and make them better so we can provide more and better support to athletes in the build up to the games next year.
Okay, I think we can all take great comfort from that. The fact that, that things are still making good, solid forward progress, and that all of the pieces of the jigsaw that were in place remain on the table. It's not as though the table has been upended and everything's thrown to
the big challenge will be, obviously 57% of the quarter places have been allocated for the Olympic Games. There's still 43%. So it's how that qualification system looks for sports. That'll be the big question. And I know we're hopeful to get some clarity on that, I'd say by the end of May, early June, from the international federations and the IOC. And I think that will probably start then feeding through to the sports and the athletes, where they can start building their programs, get remotivated, they have goals clearly in mind, and they can probably get back to some level of normality, hopefully as soon as possible thereafter.
Okay, last couple of things before I let you get back into the real world. The role of science in sport, and the role of physical monitoring and recording and things like that. The Sport Ireland Institute is probably in a different place to anywhere else in Ireland as regards providing expertise and advice in that area. Is there any way in which you might be called upon, or might have been called upon, to NFET and the scientific advisors to the government in terms of how sport can actually present its best possible case, or is that something that has been ongoing?
But certainly, really through Sport Ireland, and obviously my colleagues in Sport Ireland, we have contributed quite strongly to the submission documents to the department, and in terms of the reopening plan for our own building, but also the risk assessment tool for sports, and really the medical advice that we're taking really from Dr. Jim O'Donovan. So certainly we've had an absolute open door with my colleagues in Sport Ireland, whether it be obviously John Tracy, Paul McDermott and others. I know we have played a role in supporting the push for sport to return, but return safely over the coming weeks and months. Absolutely, yeah. We have a range of expertise at hand in the Institute across a range of different performance support services. They are available, they are supporting, and they are contributing to sports return to sport for sure.
Okay. Lastly, just before we finish off, I know we've focused here quite naturally on the elite, the high performance end of sport. You and I both were engaged with children in various different other sports and things like that. Sport has always played such an integral part in who we are as Irish people and how we see ourselves and define ourselves. Do you think that this period of time and the focus on physical well-being will sport return to the vaunted place it had in our lives and in our perceptions of ourselves as it had beforehand? Or is there a danger that fear of physical contact might actually mean it's a longer, bumpier road back for sport?
That's a tough one to finish it, Rob. I think sport will ultimately get back to where it was. I think it'll take time, and it could take a considerable amount of time. But I suppose with regard to the coronavirus, really this doesn't really come to an end until there's a vaccine widely produced and spread around the world. By all accounts, that looks to be 12 to 18 months away at the earliest. So I think we just have to find a way that we live with this virus in our community, obviously emphasizing social distancing, potentially some rule changes in sports, just so we can get people back out onto the playing pitches, the courts, whatever. But for me, I suppose, like, the loss of sport has been a huge void for people. So I think sport can play a role in bringing society back together after the crisis has ended. Some things, no doubt, will change. However, at the core of sport, it's about health and social benefits for participants, and really the camaraderie of team sports, supporters, etc. As I mentioned before about the hub and the institute, that we will miss that. It doesn't create that opportunity for build relationships. So, like, on a personal level, like, I love the Irish summer. I'm a sports fanatic. Something I like more than going to Croker for matches, but it's going for the pint in Fagan's beforehand. It's as a Dublin fan with a male wife, enjoying the banter and whatever. And I think we will miss that. And I think there's a real urge and a craving to get back to really those mass gatherings, which are at the very, very end of this, Rob. Let's be honest. It's a long way down the road. And I think in the rounds, I think people have become more connected to the community. They've been more connected to the support teams around them, family, more connected to the simple things in life. And sport is one of them. And I've no doubt that the urge to get back on the playing pitches, even just to witness and spectate a sport, will be really, really overpowering over the coming months and potentially years. And I've no doubt that sport will play a huge role in the recovery from this pandemic. And interestingly, I suppose, even the survey from Sport Ireland last week around participation rates during lockdown, huge increase in people walking, cycling, is quite interesting. And I think some people, they've changed behaviours on the back of the lockdown. They will continue and maintain those new behaviours. Some won't, some will drift back. I think in the rounds, I think we will possibly end up in a better place in a couple of years' time. It just will take us time to get there.
So an overpowering urge to get back, and you're right, we're more aware of our physical strengths and weaknesses than we have perhaps ever been. That overpowering urge will hopefully give us the power to actually get through to the other side of this and to emerge stronger on the other side. Liam Harbison, thank you so much for your time today. It has been a pleasure, as it always is, and the very best of luck with bringing sport back at every level, from the elite down to the kids playing on the side of the road, and for whatever part you can play in that. So thank you very much, and the best of luck.
Thanks, Rob. Take care.